So I like to set up expectations for my talks. I am not going to be talking to you about, I am going to be talking with you about how you can find a project that you'd want to contribute to and what a contribution actually is. And if you're a project maintainer, I want to talk with you about how you can encourage new contributors, especially people who have never contributed to open source before, and also how to make the open source community much better. I'm not going to be talking about how to make your project more popular than Lodash. I'm not going to be talking about how to force project maintainers to merge your pull requests because you're the most important coder in the world, even though you probably are, I guess. And I'm also not going to talk about why you should contribute to open source because there's a lot of content about that already, and you should go look it up. There are lots of great reasons why you should contribute to open source, so please do. So let's go ahead and get started. Open source is defined as denoting software for which the original source code is made freely available and may be redistributed and modified. I like to think of open source as something that powers our world, is a ton of fun to contribute to, and needs you to succeed. How many people in this room, and don't be shy, but how many people have never contributed to open source or contributed just like once or twice? Okay, that's pretty standard actually. How many people are project maintainers? Couple? Okay, great. So this is for the two of you. And for those of you who have never contributed before, I really want to just drill into your minds how much we need your contributions. So this is the code analysis of the Linux project. Don't try to read it. You can do it later. That's one of the cool things about open source is I totally get cloned one of the most popular operating systems in the world, and I have all the source code on my machine. I think that's totally legit. And there are almost 20 million lines of code in that source code. Totally amazing. And it was not developed just by the person who created Linux. This was an effort of 3,500 developers in just the last year. Over the course of the Linux project, I'm sure it's much more, but in the last year, 3,500 people have contributed to this project. And so, yeah, this is a commit strip that I totally love. This is what we think how open source apps are maintained, like a big party and lots of people there and working on this. But what it really is it's just one person in their mom's basement, maintaining this project. But what I actually really want open source to be is maybe not this, but virtually something like this, where it's a group of people working together to make open source great. And there are many projects that are like this. I want there to be more projects like this. And so we need everybody to come together and contribute to open source. Because this is what I call burnout. This is burnout waiting to happen. And I've experienced burnout on projects, and it's not a fun experience for me, and it's also not a fun experience for people who are using the project when the maintainer burns out. And so part of what I'm going to talk about is how you as a project maintainer can avoid burnout. And that has a lot to do with those of you who have yet to contribute to open source. So you might be thinking, those of you who haven't yet contributed to open source, I can't contribute because I'm super busy, I don't have time. Or I'm not very good at coding, what could I really do to benefit any project? Or I don't know Git very well, and so I can't use GitHub. Or there are tons of different reasons that you could say, yeah, I'm just not cut out for contributing to open source. Or one of my least favorite is I've had a bad experience contributing to open source and I don't want to get hurt again. And that's a real thing, and that's something we need to change. So you're really asking, how can I possibly contribute? And I just want to, again, drill into your minds, you can contribute, and you can contribute a great deal. Privilege, though, has a big part of contributing to open source. Not everyone is as privileged or has such great circumstances as others as far as being able to contribute to open source. I am incredibly privileged in that I can work on open source at my day job as far as it is related to what I'm working on, and I can also work on open source in the evening because I have a wonderful wife who will support me in doing that. But some people work all day at a job that doesn't allow them to contribute to open source, and then when they come home, they have to take care of a family member who fills up the rest of their time. you really can't tell. And so I think we need to remember that not everyone is privileged to be able to work on open source and be empathetic to those people because we're all in different circumstances. But regardless of this, I feel like we can, if we really, really want to do something, if we really want to contribute to open source, that we can make that happen. And so hopefully the things that I have to say will help you if you're really interested. So President Dieter F. Uchtdorf gave a talk recently, a couple of years ago, where he gave an analogy of a group of men who were trying to move a piano. And they were trying to coordinate their efforts, like you stand here, you do this, you do that. And it wasn't working very well. Pianos are really heavy. Not this light. That's not really a piano. And so they were having a lot of trouble, and one guy just said, okay, stop. Everybody, just wherever you're standing, just lift. Lift where you stand. And they were able to lift the piano, and they moved it right along. And the thing that I like about this analogy is at whatever place that you're in whatever circumstance you are, whatever skill level you're at, you can contribute. And so you lift where you stand. And I think part of the problem or part of the barrier to contributing is that people have this feeling that contributing means pushing code. A contributor is a person or thing that contributes to something in particular, and we need community contributors, a group of people having a particular characteristic in common. And so what do we all have in common? There are many things. One of them is we all write code, or many of us write code, and we all read code. We write documentation, hopefully. We all read documentation. We often teach, and we learn. And we have a lot more things that we have in common. So these are the things in particular that we share as a community that we can contribute to open source projects. And so remember that contributing to open source has has just as much to do with code as documentation or tutorials or blog posts or talks at meetups. Contributing to open source is a lot wider than just contributing code. So then you might be wondering, okay, so which project do I contribute to? There are so many, I don't know which project. And my generic answer to this is you contribute best to something you use regularly. And I have a blog post there where I talk about this a little bit more. But the basic idea is you need to be in context in the thing that you're going to be contributing to. That allows you to understand the use cases for which the library is being used. It is a lot easier for you to think of new features that are good for the library, or maybe deprecating features that are not really necessary. So, and it also keeps you motivated because the success of this library or this project is directly tied to what it is that you're trying to accomplish at work or in your side projects. Think of something that you use regularly. If you're an Angular developer, then you probably have a lot of Angular modules that you're using that you can contribute to. If you're a React developer, you have billions of Lego blocks to actually build applications with React, so you have tons and tons of opportunities to contribute. So think of the different things that you use, and those are the types of projects that you can contribute to. So the next question that I hear quite often is, how do I learn a code base? And my answer to that is break stuff. Download the code or go to a website that has the code running and call into an API and just stick the word debugger in front of it with a semicolon, and that'll enter the Chrome dev tools, and you'll be able to step through, or the Firefox or whatever. You'll be able to step through the code and see what happens when I call this with a string. What if I didn't call this with a string? What if I gave it nothing? And you identify, or you slowly peel out the orange or the onion on how this library or project works. This is a really great way to learn about projects, breaking things, rewriting things, and seeing how things work. Kylo approves of you doing open source. We have permission. So you can do it. And it really, every little bit helps. This is my first pull request that I ever made. This was back in December of 2012. And in case you can't see, I fixed a typo in a comment. So nothing that made any sort of difference at all as far as like the functionality of the code goes. And it was in Java. But this was something that really made a big impact in my life, because I figured out how what the process of contributing code is in the open source world. So just get started in contributing to open source, not just code, but also in the form of blog posts. Lift where you stand, and you'll do great things. We need you. So for you project maintainers, you need help. I have learned this myself. It is not fun to burn out on a project. So causes of burnout include change of job, change of project, loss of interest, and loss of time, and many other things that make you feel burned out on a project. I maintain a project called Angular Formally. Anybody hear of Angular Formally before? Sweet, just a couple. It's a great library for Angular, making forms in a really great way, I think. But I don't use Angular anymore. I'm using React for work, and I don't have any side projects in Angular, so it's really difficult for me to be motivated to contribute to this project. So I haven't totally lost interest in Angular. It's more of a time issue. I've run out of time to contribute, and it is a real bummer because I didn't do lots of the things I'm going to talk about to prepare the library for me to move on. Side effects may include losing context, feeling overwhelmed, and because you feel overwhelmed, you feel frustration, impatience, and unkindness. And these are things that we don't need in our open source community at all. And so we need you to prepare yourself so you won't feel these things so that our community is happier, and you're happier too. And on the other side of the coin, people need you. There are a lot more people in this room who have never really contributed to open source than there are people who are maintaining projects. I think that's a problem. And not to down talk those of you who haven't contributed yet. I'm sure you have reasons. But I would say that you all need the project maintainers to help you, because project maintainers, you have the power to help newcomers become contributors and to save yourself from burnout by doing so. And then this last point, increased diversity of thought, opinion, and background in open source software. This is something that's really important for us. Many of you come from different backgrounds and have different experiences. You know different paradigms from different programming languages. For example, the Redux library. Anybody know the Redux library? It's an amazing library for managing data. That came from Elm, from the Elm architecture. It's basically Elm architecture ported over to JavaScript. So we need different ideas and different experiences in open source. And so you have the power to increase that as a project maintainer. So if you give people really great things, then they'll give back to you. And it'll happen naturally. So before I continue, I just want to shout out a warning. There is more work ahead than, I just talked about how you don't want to burn out, whatever, but now I'm going to tell you all the extra work you have to do as project maintainers. They might seem kind of conflicting, but my hope is that if you do this extra work up front, that we'll get more people into open source who can help lighten your load and make open source better in general. So let's get that going. So Michael Rogers wrote of the Node.js project, recently wrote about how they handle contributions in a blog post called Healthy Open Source. This is an excellent blog post. It totally changed the way that I think about some parts of open source and contributors. And so I recommend that you give it a look. It's very, very great. And we're going to utilize this diagram that he provided in his blog post. So first, everybody outside are people who are potential users of your project. So to get people to use your project, you have to do a couple of things. First, you have to actually solve a problem. If you write a module that you call math, and it adds, subtracts, multiplies, sorry, the GIFs are hilarious. It adds, subtracts, multiplies, and divides. That's really awesome. Good on you for making a module, but that's not really solving a problem that people are experiencing because the language has that just fine. So you need to first solve an actual problem that people are experiencing. And then you need to document the problem and then the solution in a really clear way that makes it easy for people to understand whether or not the problem they're experiencing is the same one that you're solving. And so both the problem and the solution are an important piece of your documentation and being clear in that. And then just writing out a wall of text as far as describing your problem and solution is not totally helpful for everybody. We all learn differently. Some of us learn really well from blog post type documentation. Others of us learn a lot better from examples and demonstrations. So examples and demos are really helpful for an open source project to gain traction and for people to actually start using your project. So yeah, this is something that's really important. And it's really great if you can make it easy for other people to contribute examples, because people are going to use your library in a way, or use your project in a way that you never imagined before. And so opening up the demos and examples to other people is also quite important. Anybody get nervous like this little boy when you want to go speak? I'm raising my hand. I get really nervous when I speak. But speaking about your open source project, and more specifically about the problem that you had and the solution that you're providing, is a really great way to share your project. And one of the kind of the side effects of that is you get a recording of that. If it's not going to be recorded by the venue or whatever, then record your screen as you're giving the talk. And then you can put that up on YouTube and link that in your README or something. And that's yet another form of distribution of knowledge that we all learn differently, that some people learn better that way. I'm that way. I learn much better from videos. And so if you're super nervous about speaking, don't worry. I am also super nervous about speaking. And it's just a really great way to share the solution that you've developed. And then recording screencasts. You don't have to be a Pluralsight author or an Egghead.io author to record a screencast. Recording screencasts is a really great way to demonstrate how you can solve your problem. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can like stumble throughout the screencast. That's totally fine. But it's a really great way to help people understand whether the solution that you're presenting solves the problem that they have. So then once people start using your project, you want to help them become contributors in the form of code, but also in the form of answering questions on your Stack Overflow or on your Gitter or wherever, and writing blog posts and tutorials. This will help you in the long run as well. So we need to remember that open source software is people. And so if you want to convert users into contributors and maintain or retain these people, we need to remember that we spend a lot of time working with people and not quite as much time working with code. There are tons more comments and like lines of comments in GitHub issues and Stack Overflow questions than there are lines of code in your project. And so we need to remember that when we're dealing with open source, we're really spending a lot of time dealing with people. So we need to be nice and respectful of others. And so code of conduct, I highly recommend that your project have a code of conduct so that people feel protected and safe contributing to your project. If they don't, then it's very likely that marginalized people in particular will not feel like they're being heard and that they'll not be interested in contributing to your project. This is really important. So I recommend the Contributor Covenant. It's a fantastic code of conduct, but there are several others. To-Do has a good code of conduct as well. And then we need to remember also that this is a global industry. So I'm kind of a fluffy kind of talker. I like to use euphemisms, and I kind of beat around the bush a little bit, whereas other people are very direct and terse, and they just kind of say it like it is. And without having any tone or context or like knowing this person at all, I might think that was really rude. But in actuality, they're not being rude at all. They're just, that's the way that their culture has brought them up, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so we need to give people the benefit of the doubt when we're working in an industry that is just so distributed across the globe with so many different backgrounds. And like I said, we need all those different types of people as well. And then finally, everybody's going to laugh, so I'm just going to wait for this to happen. Support and filing bugs. So this actually always distracts me, so I shouldn't have used this. But you need to be really helpful to people asking for support and filing bugs. And this is a real sinkhole, especially if your project becomes pretty popular, because people like to ask questions a lot, and they like to have their hand held. And you want to make sure that you're teaching people to fish rather than just fishing for them. And so a lot of the examples that I have on the Angular Formally project are where somebody asked me a question, and I created an example and put it on the website and then directed them to the website. And then anybody else who has a question like that, they can just go to the website. And it really quickly turned into just go to the website, or people just stopped asking. Another really good, but at the same time, you don't want to put any barriers to people looking for support on your project. This will make it more likely for users to become contributors to your project. So then to transition people from contributors to actual committers to the project, you need to simplify your project setup. A lot of projects, it's like, okay, you need to download this, install these 3 things, and then globally install these 6 tools and Gulp plugins, and then run these scripts, and then you can contribute. But if you can make it as simple as this, and you can even look at this project for an example, then if somebody runs that validate script, it's running linting and it's running tests and a couple other checks. Then if something happens in these very simple steps, then they realize, or then they know that, no, it's none of the changes that I made. It's something wrong with the project in some way, or something wrong with my environment. They can file an issue, and we can deal with that. And so making the project setup really simple is really handy. And some projects are a lot harder than others, like you need a database and whatever else. But making it as simple as possible is a great thing. Also making things beginner friendly. This is kind of like accessibility, how if we make our applications accessible, it actually makes it better for everybody, not just the people with disabilities. In the same way, if we make our projects beginner friendly, it actually makes it better for everybody. And so at the top of my contributing file, I have this little thing here, and this is a little bit of a self-plug. But it says, working on your first pull request, you can learn how, from this free series, how to contribute to an open source project on GitHub. This is an Egghead.io series that I created to help lower the barrier for people to come in or enter into open source. So if you're one of those people who haven't yet gotten into open source and it's you just don't understand the process, I totally recommend that you look at this. Not because I make money from it, which I do, full disclosure, but because my hope is that it will help you get over the barriers that are involved with contributing to open source. And then also there's this line, if you need help, please feel free to reach out in chat. And this is just yet another thing that you can illustrate. This project cares about people, and we care about new contributors. So if you are struggling contributing, please reach out to us and we can help you. And like I said, this seems like more work, but in the end, those contributors turn into people who are responding to support requests like this. And it happens naturally. So I'm going to tell you a quick little story. So when I was working on a bug with Angular Formally about a year ago, it was a really simple bug, and I solved it super quick. I was doing TDD because that's awesome, and I love it. And I wrote the test, and then I went and implemented, and it was three characters. It was super easy to fix. And right before I committed the code, I thought, this is so easy for me, but it might not be easy for somebody who's never contributed open source before. So how could I, maybe somebody else could do it, and they could get the experience. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna do this. So I was using Mocha, so it's describe.skip. I skipped the test. I pushed just the test, not my implementation. And then in the issue where I was tracking this, I added a comment that listed out exactly what somebody would need to do if they wanted to implement this fix. And it was extremely explicit. So I said, first, watch this video to see how you can set up the project. So I recorded a screencast, and then I was able to use that screencast in my contributing MD file for people to watch later. And then I said, go to this line and enable these tests by switching describe.skip to describe.only. Then run the test, and you'll see that they're failing. Your mission is to make those tests pass. And then I went a step further, and I said, this is how you make those tests pass. Because the real challenge with contributing to open source isn't contributing the code. We can figure that out. Everybody's project is different, but you can figure out how to contribute code. The real challenge is how to get the code into the project. how to make the pull request, how to fork the repository, how to do all of these things. And so it's that process is what we're trying to accomplish with first-timers only. And so I describe, okay, and then once you got it fixed, then push it up here, and we'll get a PR, and we'll get it merged. And so I wrote a blog post about this. I did it several other times, and then a company called Hoodie in, I think, Boston has done this a lot. And they've had really great success, and they retain people really well. And in this scenario, you're making an investment that will definitely pay back. Would it have taken me, or did it take me a lot more time to welcome somebody new into the project? Absolutely, it took me a lot more time. I would have been done already before even filing the issue. But that wasn't my point. My point was to help other people get into open source. And as a project maintainer, I had the power to hand that off to somebody else and give them the kind of exposure, or the exposure to contributing to open source that they needed. That was a really rewarding experience, and the people that jumped in were actually able to continue contributing as well. So here's a quick little story. The German Wikipedia discovered that they had 4,000 new contributors every month. That's like a lot. And this is a study from Janet Gallus. They decided we need to retain these people a little bit better because they weren't being retained very well. Just like in our open source projects, we get a new contributor and there's like a drive-by contributor. We want to be able to retain these people. And so what they did is they whittled that 4,000 with some predefined rules down to 300, and then they chose half of those to receive a special reward, and then the other half would be the control group. And they created a page, and the reward went in as a badge on their profile page, and they had a special blog post to say, hey, here are the people who won the award. Thank you very much for your contribution. They found that the people who received the reward were 20% more likely to continue contributing over the course of the next year. And they did this for 11 months. And so they found that you can't pay volunteers, for Wikipedia. That'd be crazy for them to afford that. There are actually studies done where that's not very effective at retaining people anyway. But by giving them this feeling of reward, or sense of accomplishment, sense of belonging to the Wikipedia website, it made them feel much more motivated to contribute again. And so in the same way, we need to do this in open source. So GitHub is really great at rewarding people who are code contributors. You see that in on their profile page. You see that crazy graph of people who contribute a ton, and then you see on the projects the contributors that are in the project. But they're not very good at rewarding non-code contributors, the people who are answering questions on Stack Overflow and in the chat and writing blog posts. And so to kind of help with that problem, I created something called All Contributors, which is intended to recognize all people who contribute to a project, not just the ones who push code. And so the idea is we have this key of different emoji that represent the different types of contributions, so documentation, or writing tools, or contributing code, doing translations. And then you add a table with a list of all the people who have made these contributions to somewhere prominent in the project, like the README. And by doing this, you're not only opening the ideas for people to realize, oh, this project actually takes contributions from people, and they'll be motivated. They see the different types of contributions they can make. But the people who make the contribution, when they see themselves on your README, they think, wow, this is actually really cool. That's really rewarding. And they'll be motivated to continue contributing. And these are the contributors on the All Contributors specification. So Jürgen Engels, I don't think I'm saying his name right, but he wrote a CLI. That's why he has the little wrench there. He wrote a command line tool to automate the creation of this table a little bit, make it a lot easier for people to add this to their projects. And so this is something that I think will help retain the contributors to your project. So I am over time. I really apologize. Feel free to get up and leave. I'll be done here pretty quick. So the next thing, something that Node.js does really well is they give write access to anybody who gives even a trivial or a non-trivial commit to the project. So one big mistake that I made was I held on really tight to the keys of the kingdom for my project. So nobody else could commit directly to the repository. It was just me. I only accept pull requests, and I never made pull requests. I just committed directly to master. That was a mistake, and that's something that the Node.js project does not do. Nobody commits directly to master. Everybody makes pull requests, and everybody gets those pull requests signed off. And so giving write access is showing trust to people that are contributing to your project, and they will give back in return. They'll take that trust seriously. And if you're worried that somebody's going to go rogue and like blow up your project, this is not the source control management software of like 20 years ago. This is Git, and it's really easy to recover from those situations. And GitHub also makes it easy to protect branches from explosions. So don't be afraid to give people write access to your project. Finally, to take committers into maintainers. This is where you share the keys with people. This poor astronaut is going to be stuck on the moon because he did not turn people from committers into maintainers. So you just watch the people who are committing to your project, contributing to your project, and then you reach out to them and say, hey, would you like to help me with releasing this project? Would you like to help with like maintaining the website or whatever else takes the private keys of your project? And then if you lose interest or if you burn out or whatever, they can continue the project on, and people can continue to benefit from the project. And you can move on without feeling guilty, as I do. So here are some resources. I highlighted the top two. I hope that you find these resources useful. You can find a link to my slides on this last slide. Please leave me feedback. Thank you very much.